Somewhere between finishing one task and starting the next, there's a gap. 10 minutes, maybe 15. No phone, no book, nothing to fix, nothing to check. Just you, sitting there, doing absolutely nothing. And within about 90 seconds, most people start looking for the exit. That's strange when you think about it, because doing nothing is supposed to be the reward. It's the thing you complain you never get enough of over dinner, on Sunday nights, in every conversation about how busy everyone is, and yet the moment it actually shows up, unscheduled and unstructured, it doesn't feel like rest. It feels like a waiting room with no magazines and no clock on the wall, and somehow that's worse than the waiting room that has both. Even the doing nothing you think you enjoy usually isn't. A beach vacation still has a flight time, a checkout time, a plan for what you'll eat and when. A lazy Sunday still has a show queued up, a series of tabs open, a rough shape to the day. What you actually enjoy is low-effort structure, not the absence of structure. True nothing, the kind with no edges at all, is a completely different animal, and almost nobody tests it on purpose. Which is a bit like claiming you love swimming because you enjoy standing in the shallow end. The real test is what happens when there's no floor underneath you at all. Blame your ancestors for this one, because your brain never learned how to idle. For most of human history, a quiet moment wasn't a gift, it was a warning. An animal that stopped scanning the tree line, stopped listening for footsteps, stopped calculating whether that rustling sound was wind or something with teeth, didn't get to pass on its genes. So evolution built you a mind that treats stillness as suspicious. Restlessness wasn't a flaw to be fixed. It was a survival feature, constantly running in the background, checking the exits. The irony is that the exact same system that once kept your ancestors alive on the savannah is now the reason you can't sit still for 5 minutes at a bus stop, where the only predator in sight is boredom itself. Here's the part that surprises most people. Your brain doesn't actually quiet down when you stop doing something. Brain scans of people who've been told to simply sit and think show almost no drop in overall activity compared to when they're solving a math problem. What changes is where that activity goes. Instead of pointing outward at a task, it turns inward, towards something called the default mode network, which is a fancy way of saying your brain starts running its own errands the second nobody's watching. It replays old conversations and improves your side of them. It rehearses arguments you've already lost. It drafts emails you'll never send and relitigates decisions from 4 years ago that nobody, including you, is still thinking about except right now. Think of it like a factory whose assembly line just stopped. The workers don't clock out and stand quietly by the door. They start rearranging inventory nobody asked them to touch, opening boxes that were sealed for a reason, restocking shelves with things you'd rather leave packed away in the back. Nothing external is happening, but internally the floor is busier than it's been all day. Then there's the world you've built around yourself, which hasn't made any of this easier. Your phone can deliver a new piece of stimulation roughly every few seconds if you let it. A message, a headline, a video that's already auto-playing the next one before you finish this one. Your brain's baseline for what counts as enough has been recalibrated by more than a decade of infinite scroll. The same way a person who's only ever eaten heavily salted food starts finding a fresh tomato bland and slightly disappointing. So when actual nothing arrives, no notification, no headline, no autoplay, it doesn't register as calm. It registers as a void, an absence loud enough to notice, almost like the silence itself has weight. Which means the more entertaining you've made your life, the less tolerable your own unentertained company becomes. You didn't just get bored more easily over time. You engineered, one convenient app at a time, the exact conditions that guarantee it. There's also a second voice in the room, quieter than the boredom itself, and it doesn't need a phone to switch on. It's the one that shows up the moment you're doing nothing and starts totaling up what that nothing is costing you. Emails unanswered. A gym session skipped. A book gathering dust on a shelf you bought specifically to look like the kind of person who reads. Somewhere along the way, most people picked up the idea that unproductive time isn't just neutral, it's actively being stolen from some more efficient version of themselves who was supposed to be using it. So even in a completely silent room, with no notifications and no deadlines, you can still manage to feel guilty about a meeting that isn't happening. It's an oddly impressive trick, turning the absence of an obligation into an obligation of its own, then feeling like you're falling behind on it. And to be clear, the engineering that makes silence unbearable wasn't an accident on your part alone. There's an entire industry whose business model depends on you never quite getting comfortable with silence, because the second you do, you stop opening the app. Every autoplay countdown, every red notification dot, every "you might also like" is a small, deliberate bet that stillness will feel bad enough that you'll reach for relief before you've had time to ask why you needed it. You're not just bad at being bored. You're bad at being bored inside a system that gets paid every time you flinch. In case any of this sounds like an exaggeration, a group of researchers actually tested it, and the results are the kind of thing you have to read twice. They left people alone in a plain room for about 15 minutes with nothing to do but think, and gave them exactly one option if it got unbearable: a button that delivered a mild electric shock. Something most of these same people had already tried earlier in the study and rated as unpleasant enough that they said they'd pay money to avoid feeling it again. And yet, left alone with nothing but their own thoughts, a majority of the men and a notable share of the women chose to shock themselves at least once rather than just sit there. One participant shocked himself 190 times in 15 minutes. Not because the room was dangerous, because it was quiet, and quiet, apparently, is worse than pain for a brain that doesn't know what to do with unfilled time. Part of what makes unstructured time so uncomfortable is that your brain treats unpredictability as expensive to process, even when nothing is actually at stake. A scheduled task has an edge to it, a beginning and an end, and your mind can budget its attention accordingly, the way you'd pack for a trip if you knew exactly how many days it lasted. Empty time has no edges. It could be 5 minutes or 50, and something about that open-endedness makes your brain start running worst-case scenarios just to have something, anything, to hold on to. It's a bit like a browser with 40 tabs open, all frozen and unresponsive, that somehow still manages to panic the instant you open one single blank tab. The blank tab isn't doing anything, it's the only one not doing anything. And somehow, that's the one that makes the whole system feel like it's about to crash. None of this means boredom is your enemy, even though it's been dressed up to feel that way for most of your life. It's closer to a smoke detector than a fire. Loud, mildly annoying, occasionally going off at the worst possible moment, but doing exactly the job it was built for, which is telling you that something in your current situation needs your attention, even if that something is just the fact that you've been avoiding your own thoughts for 3 weeks straight. The discomfort of doing nothing isn't a malfunction. It's your mind refusing to let you outsource your entire inner life to a screen, one autoplay at a time. Which raises a question worth sitting with, ideally without reaching for your phone while you do it. If silence makes you this uncomfortable, what exactly is it you've spent all this time and all this noise carefully avoiding hearing?